Hello there, welcome to another Paro seminar. This month I wanted to do something a little bit different. I have my Wake Festival coming up next week and some of the Wakers are starting to arrive, and my friend Kev is staying with me for a few days before the event. And Kev is someone who has been engaging with my work for over a decade.
Yeah.
Initially we met in Australia, and he's someone who's not just engaged with the theory but with the practice, and I wanted to kind of actually talk a little bit about that, particularly because my focus, as many of you know at the moment, is on this idea of Church of the Contradiction. The next 10 years I really do want to get some communities, or what I call communions, set up that work with the practice of parotheology, do what's called transformance art. So that's kind of the focus for the next little bit, and instead of always talking about it, it might be good to chat with someone who's actually experienced that firsthand. So Kev, do you want to tell us who you are and then when you first met me? You might have a better memory than me.
Well, I'll start with who I've been.
Yes.
Because I started out having gone to Bible college, studied theology after kind of having, in some very real senses, my life saved by a youth ministry in the Pacific Northwest. And always thought that I wanted to pass the same thing on. So I went and studied at Bible college and was very convinced that I needed to be involved in mission. You know, a very real sense of an impending hell, and wanting to snatch people from that. Came from a very conservative, fundamentalist, evangelical background. And in the midst of doing that out in the real world, in Western Europe, and then just out of high school, and then in the midst of Bible college, going to Africa, and then after graduating and working in a youth ministry in Michigan, then went off to Australia as a missionary. And it was wanting to be relevant was the first thing. And as I was engaging that and trying to work that out in church youth ministry and having this vision that kind of had developed within me to start a place within the community that was normal, because I think church isn't normal, and to meet people where they're at, rather than inviting them to come to wherever we are. So in some ways it was very missional, but the emerging movement had started, and I would have come across your work in the midst of that, or maybe I came across the emerging movement through your work.
Yeah.
And in one side, it was disconcerting for me, it was decentering, and on the other side, it gave me hope that maybe things could be different.
Yeah. Now, I remember the first time we met. It might not have been the first time we met, but it was the period of time when we met. And it was somewhere in Australia. You'll know better than me, but interesting, something I talked about a little bit in some previous seminars, where I've talked about fundamentalism often not being the problem but being the solution to a problem, just like actually a symptom. Often the reason why Lacan said that Marx was the person who invented the symptom is within the medical world, initially a symptom like the flu was evidence of a disease. So you saw the flu and you knew, oh, this is an outburst of the virus. But actually the flu is not the virus, it is the body fighting the virus. The symptom is not part of the problem, it's the body's solution to a problem. Hence, sometimes if you get rid of the symptom, the person dies. You even get this in depression, where some people who take antidepressants are more prone to kill themselves. So there's a higher sense of suicide on antidepressants. And one of the reasons is because the depression is not necessarily the problem, it's the solution to a problem. That's a very important thing. But anyway, when I met you, I got the feeling that your religion and your religious perspective. You were very dedicated, very focused on it, but that it was not something to directly critique as if it was wrong,
Yep.
because it was actually holding you together in some way. But first of all, would you say that that was the case before we move on? Or
I mean, that setup of problem and solution. Yeah, that does work for me, because I think in some ways I always felt like I needed a certainty, and that doubt was a problem, and probably my fundamentalism, and I grew up in this, and this is all I really knew. Maybe some of that was the solution to that problem of unsettledness and not being okay within myself.
And do you think, maybe without, you can go as personal or not personal as you want, but that, the idea of God the Father, some of the stuff that was going on with your relationship to God the Father was connected in some way to your own experience of your father?
Yeah, and I'm quite happy to go personal on that. That's a significant.
You don't want this to be a therapy session for you or anything? A public,
Well, I've already gone through a lot of that, right? I love my dad, but I also hated my dad, and that that relationship was so core for me, and the tension there and the abuse. When I co-officiated his funeral, my brother wasn't going to speak at it, wasn't going to say anything until I told him we're going to tell the truth. And I really needed to do that. And so my relationship with my father has always been tied up in my view of God as a result. That angry God, that God that I didn't know whether it was going to come around the corner and get me.
Yeah.
Right? Because that was kind of always the feel. That was always like being on shifting sand. And that's impacted my whole family.
Yeah.
But I can only really speak for myself, and the trauma that I experienced in the midst of that, and the confusion, and trying to figure out some kind of answer that made sense of that.
Yeah. Because I knew someone, a friend, who he had a very strong, what we would call fundamentalist religion, very sincere religion. And he was a smart guy. He would go out to evangelism, said the same thing as basically trying to help save people from hell, etc., etc. But he lost his religion through a set of circumstances. One was he was beaten up at one point, and things didn't work out for him. He had maybe a slight kind of psychotic break of sorts, a little bit. Various things happened, and he just lost his faith. But he hadn't really worked through what was inside it. It was holding him together. And again, I talked about this in a couple of seminars ago, but the problem was, without that fundamentalist religion, but without having worked it through, he then ended up killing himself.
Yeah.
Because it was it wasn't the case of, the religion's wrong and we have to get rid of that, and treating it just purely on an intellectual level. Yes, there's an intellectual level, and we can believe our religion or not, right? But at a deeper level, there's also something else going on. And if you, and this is connected to then the work of paratheology, is instead of coming in and going, either what's right about your position, what's wrong about your position, it's also a sensitivity to going, is this holding you together in some way? Is there a trauma that you need a space to begin to be able to process?
Yeah.
And then, so that's what I remember at the very beginning, and because, as we've talked about many times, there was an intensity to you. There still is, but less so. There was an intensity to you that felt like you were having to hold yourself together.
Yeah. Well, and to hold the monster back, because I never wanted to become my father. And there's elements where I did, not to that extent at all. But I like to tell the story of one of our early encounters, because I had followed you around Sydney at different spots, and there was a little bit of fanboy stuff, and and at some point you said, "But we're friends, right?" And it was just like a revelation to me: is that possible, right? But I think we were drinking some Ardbeg whiskey, which you weren't like necessarily a fan of whiskey, but you joined me on that. And there was a point where you made the statement, Kev, you scare the shit out of me. And, there's an element of me and some alphaness there that I like that. But then also...
I said that, and I'm from Northern Ireland.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. You said I've been through the troubles.
Yeah.
And like that pointed out what I already knew, that there was this rage that I've always held down, and I've been very constrained. And I think my tradition, my religion, was also part of the holding down. So the rules suited me because it kept me together.
Yes.
Because who knows what could poke out, right? And I didn't want to be that.
Yes. Like as a dimension, like in terms of like an obsessive might keep their house very tidy. My house is very tidy. I don't so I have maybe obsessive traits, but or obsessively collect something so that they have every issue of something. But there was also something about there was an orderly dimension to your beliefs. Yep. There was an orderly dimension to the way you presented that almost felt like, because you were scared of the cracks of something. Yeah.
Well, in systematic theology, in the course that I went through, that made it made a sense of everything.
Yes, because it gives you an answer to everything.
The confusing stories that are in the Bible and the conflict that's there.
Yeah.
And that was a good part of my process as well.
Yeah.
So I don't look back on that and go, I just want to throw all of that out. It was part of probably a sequence or an experience that I had that was really good for me.
Yes.
When I arrived at Bible college, the psychologist there, he said, Kev, what have you come from? He did a disc test and I was flatline, and so he recognized that I had come from something that had been traumatic. So a bit of my life has been about doing work on myself, but then also my work was involved with helping other people who were in kind of a similar boat.
Yeah. And whenever I said to you, you scared the shit out of me, right? There's a certain sense in which I was saying that for a reason, which was this is the moment where you have to choose your battles. Again, I'm not sitting there discussing the rights and the wrongs of your systematic theology, right? What I wanted to do is a little intervention that might confront you with yourself, something that you know about yourself, but confronted through the mirror of the other. So whenever I met you and there was this intensity and this, I'm holding myself together, and almost this aggression to yourself, like aggressively holding yourself together, the moment where I said, you scared the shit out of me and I grew up in the Troubles, was a way of potentially in that moment, not confronting you with the what of your belief, but the how of your belief. That is your belief holding you together? Is there this kind of aggressive holding? And I think that was the beginning of what partly our friendship, and also but hopefully what you got out of this work.
Well, it's been very generative, right? So my reading of your first book, How Not to Speak of God, really in that and the ongoing works influenced what we did in our ministry of the cafe. Which created space that wasn't trying to push people into a mold that they only had to believe one way. Like we were quite open, which is also controversial in our circles. My friendships were not contingent on agreement or conversion or any of that. I guess even now, creating circles of people that find safe harbor is now what drives me. And it comes from a very probably sensitive space for me, rather than an aggressive space.
I mean, in a lot of progressive circles, there is an attempt to have an inclusive set of beliefs. There's a welcoming of different people, different beliefs, but often how that's presented is that underneath all the differences, there's a similar belief. Love your neighbor, or a benevolent God, or whatever it is. They're looking for something that is in a way shared among all the differences. That's very different from what I'm trying to do. Is that whenever, and Søren Kierkegaard talks about it, it's like not the what of belief, but the how of belief. What I'm more interested in is not that, we find, and I think this is what you were doing, is that, it's not that we try to find, there's a universal belief underneath it all. We've all got our different streams, but there's this oceanic something that out of which all the streams bubble. But rather going, no, it's like we can argue about beliefs, and beliefs are significantly different, and some of them aren't compatible, and some of the streams aren't compatible, and hey, let's maybe think about certain philosophical systems might be more robust than others, right? But when it comes to what you were doing, and I think this transition work is like you're going like, but the question we're asking is not, can we get a universal belief or uncover that? It's help people go, how does my belief function? How do I hold my belief? How is it holding me? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Am I reliving in my relationship, say, with Father God, a relationship with Father, or with this idea of a motherly God, the idea of the mother? And that's the move. The move isn't, as I say, this more progressive, like trying to find like John Hick or something, like a universalist belief, but rather going a more reflective space in which one can begin to see how one exists in the world, and whether their religion is a defense mechanism, what it's defending against, and how one might unpack and address what is within that defense. Which I think is what you were doing.
Yeah, and that shifted and changed over time, and became more open. And like I probably land in a space where I currently would say I think we're all wrong, which is freeing.
Yeah.
Now there's still that engagement, that dialogue, and if someone wants to know where I'm coming from any faith or philosophical perspective, love to talk about it. But I'm also not going to lead with that.
Yeah.
So I want for me, I lead with vulnerability, and I tell some of my story, which is really about brokenness and about how I'm not over that.
Yes.
So let's be in this together.
Yeah. Because in a way, we've talked about this off camera, but like this is very common with people around my work, but you're going like, I don't necessarily go with everything you're saying, or that's just not, but that's not the issue.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like I even at times I'm a little bit annoyed with people that are real fans of everything that you say, right?
I don't know if there's many of those, but are there?
Yeah, they're not. But like coming to Wake has been a yearly pilgrimage for me.
Yeah. And
I only have missed 1 year since I started coming. And it's been a really significant thing. And to some degree, I don't come for who's presenting, though that's the framework that it happens in. And I get challenged with ideas. Some stuff bugs me. Some stuff affirms what I'm thinking. But I tend to like the stuff that bugs me. Yeah. Because it's unsettling. It's decentering. It's rupturing. Like my first wake, I cried most of the time, and I still, I still do. A bit. And that's some of it, I think, is maybe one of my superpowers, that I can be okay with that, even in the midst of not being okay with that. But it's a vulnerability, and I think for me that's the core thing. And like there's some of the stuff that gets talked about that I don't understand, and that there's probably some self-consciousness that I have about that, because my brain doesn't work that way. But it doesn't matter. Yeah. Because I feel like the way that I'm believing has shifted, and the way that I am, my way of being.
This is the key, and this is the key to like, so we're talking about Wake, which is this festival, which is where the practice of this work is one of the places that, you know, we try to do this practice. And one of the things about that is, while there is a lot of intellectual content and lots of thinking and speaking and interviews and all that stuff, that's not the point. And this is actually a very difficult thing, because most people follow somebody's work because they agree with them and because they want to say, that's the team I'm in. You know, those are the set of beliefs that I affirm. But what we're doing, and you see that within Wake, is actually people coming from a variety of different beliefs, and many not agreeing with what I say, but feeling that the space in which they're able to ask questions of how they hold their beliefs, and in a space of grace where they're able to do that with no judgment, I think that's what draws us together, and that's the underlying key of Church of the Contradiction, is this idea, a space of grace where you, not me, I don't come in. Even when I said about you that when I first met you, thought, oh, is his religion holding him together? And we started to talk about that. Still, that's maybe an intuition I get, but that's your work that you do. And what I want to create is a space where people can ask that question. And in a sense, there's always stuff in the jobs we choose, the partners we choose, the partners we don't choose, our religious expression, the things we buy, the way we arrange our homes. All of this stuff will tell us something about our own desires. In Lacanianism, it's called the gaze. Whenever you notice that, whenever you think that you're just in an objective thing, you're always in arguments with your partner, for example, and then you suddenly realize, oh, I poke and prod until the argument happens. So this argument is actually an expression of something in me, right? That's the gaze. You're kind of see within this supposedly objective world something of your own desire, and that's key to this work. And I think, you know, that's the work that you've done and are doing, you know. So do you feel like, from the Kev that I met a decade ago to the Kev who's sitting here with his coffee, by the way, Kev's part of a group called Short Street.
Indeed, a little product placement.
Incredibly good coffee that is keeping Wake caffeinated. So in Australia, so if you're, you know, far away from Australia, which most people are, it might be
hard to get.
Yes,
but we may be able to work things out.
But yes, so the Kev back in the day that I met then, and the Kev now.
I continue to be who I've always been in some ways, right?
Yeah.
But I think the permission to question and to doubt was a huge step for me. And that the tidy answers that I'd had and I'd been trained in didn't all work. And even like the opportunity that I now have to teach at my old university and to offer that space for students, which is, you know, it's a little bit scary, right? But I think it opens up a world that they're going to go into, and it opened up a world for me. That I didn't have to manipulate people to come along with me. It was, I could be on the journey alongside. It has loosened me up quite a bit. Now there's still those tendencies, because I grew up in a context, and I needed to hold things together. So there's still some of that that does come out. On my office wall, I've created kind of a montage of pictures, and the very top, it was inspired by this panoramic picture from I think it might be the 40s, and it was a revival camp meeting that my grandfather presided over, and it's all the campers, which is part of my history from an Advent Christian background. And the Millerites had predicted when Jesus was going to come back and all of that. Now, it's part of my heritage. And I've grown more and more curious about that and looking into that. But I've put pictures of different family members, especially my grandparents and my parents, but also And that's on one side of this montage of pictures. And then on the other side are some of the people that are more current, and a lot come from Wake, but also friendships that I had in Bible college that have progressed and developed, and that we have been on our journeys and trying to make sense of the theology that we learned and concepts of God, and now to live that out in a real world.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I hold a lot more loosely now.
Yeah. And like you mentioned about how, you know, because I've seen the changes in you, but you say, you know, there's still a part of the old Kev that's there, and we've talked about this again, but that's not, one is these things shape us, our past shape us, and it's not even about getting rid of those dimensions. Like part of your drivenness and part of that focus that you have has allowed you to set up businesses and set up groups and organizations. So in some respects it's about not allowing our symptoms to destroy us, but somehow sublimating them and seeing if they can be of benefit to us. So yeah, I'll always be the way I am, you'll always be the way you are, but there's people around you who maybe had a similar experience to you, who haven't done the work, and potentially it's been destructive for them, you know. And so in a way, this is people. You know, we've talked about this off camera, but you know, you can see in them the fact that you could have gone that direction.
Oh, yeah. And there was elements that I was headed that direction. Yeah, because we are all impacted by how we're raised, how we respond to that, and our biological makeup. And like a vision for my life is to be present for people that have had the same experience, but also vastly different ones, all of which tend to unravel us, and to create space where we can be honest about that. Because I don't think, the world for one is not a safe space for that to happen. There are places, there are systems of analysis and therapy and all of that. I think the church is a very unsafe place to be authentic. And you know, part of what my wife Lisa and I have done is create communities that it is safe to be who you are, and also to be able to question and to find acceptance in the midst of that journey.
One of the things Kev does is called a whiskey circle, and it has a lot of the same values, because what I've talked about here and we've talked about is one, grace, a space where you don't feel defensive, where you feel when you're ready you can talk, and what you say will not be judged. You know, you can, like in AA, you say you're an alcoholic in a space that's safe. Grace, the place of doubt that you mentioned, that you're given permission to ask questions of yourself, ask questions about your past and who you are, and the kind of transformative dimension of that, and that's what kind of whiskey circle is.
Well, and you talk about pyrotheology being a technology, and I've used that in reference to alcohol. Now, I came from a background that alcohol was not allowed. You just don't do this, right? And I think church culture is shifting, and that's becoming more and more acceptable. But when I went to Australia, it was very acceptable. An early retreat I went on, they brought eskies of beer, and I'm like going, okay, I was all unsettled as a fundamentalist, going, okay, this is crazy. But I think in a mindful way, the use of a substance like alcohol, being purposeful, not getting nuts with it, but also no judgment for wherever anyone's at, right? To have the taste experience, to talk through, where a whiskey came from, maybe the memories that are associated with it, where you first had a certain whiskey, but at the same time, foster a conversation, curate a conversation that is about sharing of your own journey and being authentic. And I've had amazing times of everybody in the room having a cry. And so at any time I have a conversation, if somebody has a cry, I feel like I've reached my goal. Now, it's not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
But it's...
I'd have to be there a long time. Not much.
Yeah, we haven't experienced that yet. Yeah. It's usually even, it's me doing that, right? But it's not everybody's way of coming to realizations or whatever. But for the circles that I create there, and that my friends create with me,
there's a freedom for that to be shown, for emotion to be shown.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what if, because another element then that's very key, and I'm interested to see if this has been important or not to you, I'm not sure, but in Wake, as an example of a liturgy, there is music, there's poetry, there's art. How much has that been a helpful part of this journey?
Oh, it's definitely been a helpful part. Some of the performance stuff that happens, there's still the fundamentalists in the back of my head that, oh, is this okay?
Yeah.
Right?
We've had some weird stuff as well, yeah.
And I've appreciated it because it's an expression of artisticness, of ideas, of pushing boundaries. Music has been a key one for me, but even the expression of ideas, I'm glad that I've become friends with Barry Taylor, some of the stuff that he's presented over time. Obviously stuff that you present always challenges me, and I just don't know, but that's a healthy process for me. But even the magic stuff that goes on, it's a brilliant metaphor, but it's also a brilliant just experience to be unsettled and go, what is real?
For me, magic, one of the things I like about magic is that basically a magic trick is a sequence of events, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but some of those sequences are out of sight. So you just see A, C, D, and E, or an F, whatever. And that's what makes it magical, because although there's this very natural sequence, by not seeing something, by a sleight of hand, it becomes magical. For me, that's what bad thinking is. It's very easy to construct a philosophical argument, and it's convincing because some small element has just been hidden. So I kind of, in the same way that I always try to work out a magic trick, I'm always, when I listen to a thinker talking, I'm always looking for, is there a sleight of hand somewhere, so magic kind of, the training for me of kind of trying to work out how the trick is done is not dissimilar from the training I got in university to try to figure out when an argument is right and when an argument is not good. Anyway, that's just beside the point, but I do like that about magic. So the thing, I guess, then what I want to just bring out of this conversation is this idea of grace, this idea of experiencing an ability to question, and then this space in which you can encounter your own unconscious. You can encounter the functions that your position, whatever your position is, might be protecting you from, what might be working. And it's, so that's what I mean by the how, is the space of basically this liturgy of lack that I talk about, is trying to see that we need spaces like that in our lives. We don't live our entire life there, but once a week, you also once a year do a pilgrimage, once a week, once a month, once a year. We need that type of desert in the oasis space that can really transform how we exist within the world.
And that's the experience of that, and concepts that you've brought up of decentering practices and rupture and all of that is something that I've taken on and do in the circles that form in my life, because it's been an important process for me. And Lisa comments about that first year, I came back different. Now there was also stuff going on for me that I go, but didn't I come back different later in that process as well? And I believe that I have. And some of it's incremental, some of it's somewhat radical. And that's why I keep coming back. Like, it's been an important part of my process.
And interestingly, well, something you touched on there, which is like, there was a point in your life when you enjoyed the systematic, when you enjoyed having everything in its place, you enjoyed covering over the cracks, plastering over those things, right? But there was a point, and again, this is very central to the work that I do, is the point where you start to enjoy the cracks. You start to enjoy being disrupted, being decentered. And that's very key for me, because enjoyment has to be galvanized. This is not, this shouldn't, and this is why it's a festival, like Wake's a festival, and Church of the Contradiction has lots of comedic elements to it. It's like it has to be enjoyable. If sometimes kind of there's the activist side of the world can sometimes be very dour, always beating ourselves up, and now there's an enjoyment in that, but it's a very hidden enjoyment. So what you did is, from getting enjoyment out of holding yourself together, you started to allow yourself to enjoy doubt, to enjoy unknowing, to enjoy, as you said, like when you mentioned at Wake, that you actually enjoy the things you agree least with now. That's an interesting move.
And even the enjoyment of enjoyment.
Like
we were talking about that earlier. Where it's been hard for me to allow myself that, which I think is a result of a legalistic faith. And a legalistic faith that conceptually is all about grace, but can't get away from the law. Which I have a concern about. Because also that same faith and those same structures were also part of what literally kept me alive.
Yes.
Because there were points that I was, I had suicidal ideations. And I'm grateful that there was a group of men in my church. So I'm not done with the church. But I also think that there are different expressions. And I've had the privilege of being able to form some of those, and have people really wish that some of those things were still going. So.
Well, is there anything else you would like to share? This has been, when I sat down, I was thinking, well, I'm going to talk about this week, and then I was like, maybe we should just have a chat, and you were like, I'm totally up for it. And a lot more came out of this than I expected, so I've really enjoyed this. But anything else you want to share?
I don't think so. I think we have hit it. The process for me continues to be good. I'm glad I'm here this week. There's also challenges to being here. It's a bit of a trek from Australia. We're about to move first week of July. But for me to now be in a place where, even with all of that chaos that's going on, that I can cycle through going, oh crap, what have I decided to do? I'm away this amount of time. That I can also settle back into, no, this is a gift to me. And it's good. Along with the friendships that will be rekindled, people that I know that are going to be here, and then the new friendships. I'm looking forward to that.
I'll say one final thing then about a phrase that you used, which I love, which is enjoying your enjoyment. One way of thinking about that is that we're already enjoying, right? Even if, interestingly, sometimes our prohibition of enjoyment. So growing up in a fundamentalist environment, often people start to prohibit their enjoyment. They prohibit their desire. And then that becomes the desire for prohibition. So you prohibit your enjoyment, and then you start to enjoy the prohibition. So that's a very subtle move, really, to what's called drive. But you're still enjoying. And in psychoanalysis, one of the interesting things is to confront our enjoyment. So, for example, with you, with systematic theology, with having the answers, with having it all sorted out, even if that was quite a burden, there was an enjoyment being got out of that. Once you start to realize the enjoyment you're getting out of something like that, you start to enjoy your enjoyment, and then it changes. So often then you can't enjoy in the same way. So when I mentioned about how you moved potentially, without putting words in your mouth, but you moved from enjoying being held together and having the answers to enjoying doubt and unknowing and decentering and rupture. There's a sense in which as you came to see what you were getting out of this, as you came to see that there was an enjoyment out of it, there was a pleasure, there was something you were getting out of it, the very insight of that began to weaken it. And then what happens without even realizing it, without even trying, is it becomes something hopefully healthier and better.
And full of freedom.
And full of freedom. So for me, for many of us, especially neurotics or whatever, but for anybody, enjoying your enjoyment means asking yourself, what am I getting out of my ex, right? This relationship that might not be great, this religion that sometimes makes me depressed and feel like a burden or a weight, or makes me feel like I've got like certain sexual purity things that I feel are oppressive. What maybe am I getting out of that? What actually is my enjoyment? And that very act of discovering that can lead to something, to a transformation in the way that you enjoy. And as I say, I think one of the key things that I've seen as a friend in you is, as I say, from an enjoyment of having the answers to an enjoyment of playing in the field of questions.
Yeah, I like that.
So, all right, well listen, thanks very much for tuning in. We're gonna get stuck into wake, and I'll see you all very soon. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.